Some guy sends me this letter. I find it very difficult to listen to your broadcast because of your cuss words. No, cuss words? Cuss words? What, are you still in fucking kindergarten? Get it in your head. When somebody's trying to kill you, it's not cuss words, it's proper language. When someone's stealing all your fucking money to give it to the military-industrial complex to slaughter innocent Palestinians, it's proper language when you say, I had enough of your fucking shit.
As more and more begin to know, the status quo has got to go. They're bound to say yes to a man named Dr. No, a man who makes the establishment panic. Grassroots are growing way too wild, too organic.
So Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin on Thursday admitted the U.S. does not know if Iran was operationally involved in the drone attack in Jordan that killed 3 American soldiers. On the same day, U.S. officials told CBS News that plans have been approved for strikes against Iranian personnel and facilities in Iraq and Syria. So when he was asked by a reporter about how much Iran knew about the drone attack or if it was operationally involved, Austin's response was, quote, "You know, we believe that this was done by an element of what is known as the Axis of Resistance, and these are Iranian proxy groups. And how much Iran knew and didn't know, we don't know. But it really doesn't matter because Iran sponsors these groups," end quote. So again, this is the thinking, is that Iran arms these groups. That means that they must be responsible and we have to hit Iran. But they have no idea if Iran ordered the attack, was involved in any way beyond the support that they give these groups. And it doesn't matter. They're still planning to strike Iran in response to this, which is just, if it provokes a full-blown war with Iran, a lot more American troops are going to be killed. Austin said that if the Shia militias the U.S. believes were responsible for the attack were not supported by Iran, that these kind of things wouldn't happen. And you could say the same for all the conflicts that the U.S. is involved in. The U.S. has said that it believes the Islamic Resistance in Iraq, an umbrella group of Iraqi militias, was responsible for the attack. Kateb Hezbollah announced on Tuesday that it was suspending attacks on U.S. troops in Iraq and Syria, which was the result of pressure from the Iraqi government and Iran, and this shows that Iran does not seek more escalations in the region. So on Thursday, this was interesting, Reuters reported that Iran was reducing its presence in Syria after Israeli airstrikes on Damascus killed 5 members of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps on January 20th. So 5 Iranians were killed then by Israel. In December, Israel killed a senior IRGC officer who was based in Syria. So this report said that they were pulling some of these military advisors out that they have in Syria because over fears of being sucked into a major regional war. However, El Mayadeen, which is a Lebanese news outlet, they cited sources who said the story was not true and that they were not scaling back their deployment from Syria. So who knows what the story is there, but definitely interesting to see that Iran might be scaling back its presence in Syria, which could be, they say it's related to what happened with Israel, but it could be kind of another signal to the U.S. that, Iran is not looking for a fight here. And Iran has vowed that it will respond to any U.S. attacks, whether they're inside Iran or against Iranians elsewhere in the region. The U.S. officials, U.S. officials told CBS on Thursday that the plans were approved for these strikes against Iranians in Iraq and Syria. Not just against the Shia militias, the Iran-backed militias, but actual, the Iranian military. Because the thing I covered yesterday was that they were probably going to do that. And now this says, yeah, this is the plan, which it's strange that they're putting it out there. So I think kind of the best case scenario here is that the U.S. gives Iran some kind of idea of what it's going to hit. Iran clears it out. The U.S. blows up some warehouses, and that's it. Everybody kind of steps back. But there's so many different factors here with everything that's going on in the region that there's just such a huge risk of this thing really exploding into a big, big war here. So the U.S. has created a new stockpile of military equipment during drills in Australia last summer to prepare for a future war with China over Taiwan. The stockpile was left behind after the Talisman Sabre exercises, which ran from July 22nd to August 4th last summer. And they were billed as the largest ever iteration of the drill, really showing, the U.S. focus on the region and the preparation for a future conflict in the Asia-Pacific. So Reuters reported that the U.S. left behind equipment, including 330 vehicles and trailers and 130 containers in a warehouse in Bandiana, a suburb of Wandonga, which is a city in southeastern Australia. It's not clear what are in those containers in the warehouse, but they say the supplies are enough to supply 3 logistics companies that would be focused on getting equipment to U.S. troops who are fighting a war elsewhere in the region. General Charles Flynn, who's the top Army commander in the Pacific, he said, quote, "We are looking to do this more and more. There's a number of other countries in the region where we already have agreements to do that," end quote. So the U.S. is working to establish similar stockpiles in the Philippines, Japan, and other countries in the region, and Congress wants to establish a weapons stockpile in Taiwan itself, something that might not be publicized due to the risk of provoking China, but that's something they're probably already working on that. U.S. Army Secretary Christine Wormuth, she said last year that the Army's role in a future war with China would be to establish staging bases for the Navy, for the Marines, and for the Air Force, and to provide what she called intra-theater sustainment using the weapon stockpiles and watercraft. So saying that the Army would move stuff around the region. And she said the Army would also have a role to play in the homeland since a full-blown war with the U.S. and between the U.S. and China would likely spread. She said, quote, "If we got into a major war with China, the United States homeland would be at risk as well, with both kinetic attacks and non-kinetic attacks," end quote. So this is what they're talking about and openly preparing for. U.S. military officials make it no secret that they're prepping for war with China. The way that they frame it is that, oh, we're trying to deter a war. That's the last thing we want. But if we have to fight a war, we have to be able to win it. And while what they call deterrence is actually provocation, and it's just making war in the region more likely because, of course, China is reacting. And things just continue to, heat up.
Here's Gerald Salenti with today's trends in the news.
Companies, CNBC, announced the highest level of job cuts in January since early 2023. The job outplacement firm, Challenger Gray and Christmas, said planned layoffs totaled 82,307 for the month. You ready? A jump of 136% from December. It was the second highest total layoff and the lowest planned hiring level for the month of January in data going back to 2009. Oh, 2009. Oh, the Great Recession. Got it? Little fucking language they use. Suck away more money for losses in loans in commercial real estate. Partly because of the souring investment environment in office space. Souring investment. Could you believe this in office space? This thing's going to hit hard. It's starting to happen. They're burying the news. They don't want you to know how bad it is. Here. Wall Street Journal yesterday. Real estate turmoil hits office towers. Rents at the highest end buildings have been falling, while the rates of leasing have been slowing. Isn't that nice language? Don't worry about it. Everything's going to be okay. It'll come back. It'll come back. Eurozone economy flattens as Germany and France falter. Oh, Germany, the largest economy in Europe and the fourth largest in the world, faltering. How long have we been writing about this in the Trends Journal? Oh, no, but it came out as news. Oh, yeah, the Financial Times. This is big. You ready? Europe is still recovering from a lingering energy shock and has not experienced the same degree of fiscal stimulus as the more resilient United States economy in recent years. Fiscal stimulus, cheap fucking money being dumped into the system to enrich the bigs. Yeah. Merger and acquisition activity in 2021 was an all-time high because the money's so cheap and bigs keep getting bigger. But energy crisis, but they don't say who caused it. The politicians. The little pricks, and I can't say the other word because I don't want to use cuss words. IMF doubles Russia's growth outlook as Ukraine war stimulates economy. Guess what? We had forecast this when everybody else, when Biden said we're going to punish Putin with the sanctions, when everybody was saying Russia's going to go down, and all the companies started pulling out. What was one of our top trends? Self-sufficiency, self-sustaining economy. We said Russia has all the human and natural resources it needs to pull away from globalization and push up the economy. Ignored by everyone. But that's why you subscribe to the Trends Journal, because you're getting history before it happens. Self-sustaining economies are the way of the future, not globalization. Globalization is only enriching the rich. So the manufacturers can get their shit made into cheapest slave labor anywhere they want it, bring it here into any country, sell it, and make more profits. So all those companies that left, all those companies, the Starbucks and the this bucks and the that bucks, all the people that left Russia, the Russians took over. Self-sustaining economy, and same thing with America. We have all the human and natural resources we need to be self-sustaining and rising the level of the people. So EU approves $50 billion in Ukraine aid. This just came out. EU leaders have signed off on $50 billion. Look at these clowns. Look at these little fucking clowns. Look at these little scumbags. Hey, all you people. Oh, I was reading about, what was I saying before about the Eurozone economy flatlines? Fuck the people. We got to get the war going. And those little slime balls that they don't worry about getting any money. They're sucking off the public tit. Oh, you don't like public tit? Yeah, they could give a shit. Again, warmonger is in charge. There are freaks running a country near you. A cunt tree. And now we got U.S. plans blame for drone strikes on Iran-backed militia. And then this is an exclusive today from Reuters. U.S. believes drones that killed soldiers were Iranian-made, sources say. And then they quote that Lloyd Austin. Lloyd Austin, he was a general. He killed people in Iraq. He killed people in Afghanistan. He looks at us like we're a bunch of privates. Yeah, he hates people like me. I launched Occupy Peace. Oh yeah, I how dare I don't want to get involved in foreign entanglements because I believe in George Washington and the founding fathers who warned us not to get involved in this shit's been going on for thousands of years. Isolationist. I'm not an isolationist. I'm not a warmongering freak like you are. He goes on to say, Austin said, how much Iran knew or didn't know, we don't know, but it really doesn't matter because Iran sponsors these groups. It funds these groups. And in some cases, it trains these groups on advanced conventional weapons. Hey, Lloyd, how about the United States that sponsors these groups like the IDF, where they're stealing billions of dollars of our money to slaughter Palestinians? Hey, Lloyd, how about the United States sponsoring Ukraine and the EU to kill Russians? Oh, that doesn't count.
Don't tread on us. There was an incident in 1983, Beirut barracks bombings, when, according to this source here, I believe there were 241 U.S. military personnel killed in this. What can you tell us about this and what happened? Did we have to declare war on Lebanon after this happened? How were we able to get out of it without being Neville Chamberlain appeasers who just want to give the world away?
Yeah, great question. Yes, you're right. It was 241 American Marines were killed, along with, I think it was 37 French soldiers also were killed. They were killed in their sleep by the suicide truck bomb, crashed through the front of their barracks and detonated by, I guess, what you could call like a proto-Hezbollah. It wasn't exactly Hezbollah or the Amal militia, I'm told. It was, some sort of unnamed group of Shiites who did it, but along the lines of, what became Hezbollah a couple of years, or maybe the next year after that, 84. But, first of all, this is important. I guess it's not absolute proven fact, but I think it's a very credibly claimed fact. Viktor Ostrovsky, the former Mossad spy, wrote in his book By Way of Deception that the Israelis had an informant that warned them that there was a big Mercedes truck that was being packed full of explosives, and that the Israelis immediately knew that there were only a couple of targets that would possibly require that. And one of the obvious ones would be the American Marine barracks out there at, I forgot if it was a hotel or wherever they had stationed up there. And then the decision was made to not warn the Americans and to not tell them. And in fact, let me read you. I have the quote here, dude. No, we're not there to protect Americans. They're a big country. That was what he was told. Why not to warn the Americans? CIA, that's their job, not us to warn them. And then after it happened, quote, hey, they wanted to stick their nose into this Lebanon thing. Let them pay the price.
Is this from his book By Way of Deception?
Right.
Yeah.
Which is the slogan of Mossad. So that's, how the what the Israelis think of us. Refuse to warn us when a truck bomb is coming to kill hundreds of our guys and give a damn about that. And then
So what is Reagan's response to this?
Well, so here's the thing about it. A better story even than what Ostrovsky adds here is about our hero Ron Paul. And you can read this, Keith, in his great book, A Foreign Policy of Freedom, which is a collection of his foreign policy speeches. And the speeches go, Mr. Reagan, don't listen to the hawks. Whatever you do. Oh, by the way, people know Ron Paul went to Congress in 97, but he also went in like 77 or somewhere around there and stayed in Congress until he ran and then lost for Senate in, I think, 84, possibly 88. No, because 88 he ran as a libertarian. So it was in 84 he ran for Senate in Texas and lost to Phil Gramm in the primary. God, Phil Gramm. But anyway, before that, so Ron had been in the Senate then. Dr. Paul had been in the House before. So anyway, he gives a speech and he says, Mr. Reagan, don't listen to the hawks. Do not put our guys in Lebanon. You do not want to intervene in this war. It's such a crazy situation, all the different factions over there and the Israelis intervening now the way they are and all these things. And if you do, it's just going to lead to conflict and then worse conflict from there. Just don't do it, please. And then the next speech, this is again, Foreign Policy of Freedom by Dr. Paul. The next speech in line, in his House speeches. Oh, Mr. Reagan, you didn't listen to me and you did the wrong thing and you put our guys on the ground in Lebanon. Please get them out of there before it's too late. Don't kill anybody. Don't escalate. Don't give them a mission. Don't do nothing. Just turn around and go before it's too late, man. Let's get the hell out of there now. Next speech. I told you. Now 241 Marines are dead. And what do we get out of it? Why are we in Lebanon? Mr. Reagan, for God's sake, listen to reason. Get our boys out of Lebanon now. And then the next speech. Thank God you finally listened to reason and you did the right thing, Mr. Reagan, and you got our guys out now, at least, while we're only this far behind instead of much worse. So thank goodness for that, because imagine if we decided to go to war against the Shiites there now, allied with Israel in that mess in Lebanon, we'd never get out again. And on like that. And it's just the brilliance of Dr. Paul. And, finally, at least too late, at least the wisdom of Ronald Reagan to listen to that sort of advice. I don't know if he listened to Dr. Paul or not, but he decided that he wanted to get out of there. There's no way it was worth it for America to get involved there, and he shouldn't have been involved there at all. And I don't know, he must have given the orders for the battleship New Jersey to join Israel in shelling Shiite neighborhoods at some point, but I forget exactly when that was. But I know that later on there was a hijacking of an airplane, or was it a ship? It may have been the Achille Laurel ship. I think it was an airplane. And then the terrorists were running up and down the aisle going, New Jersey, New Jersey. And they were looking for Americans to kill, and they're going, New Jersey, New Jersey. And the people on the plane were like, what the hell is he talking about? Why are they saying that? Well, that was the name of the battleship that had been shelling the neighborhoods, the suburbs of Beirut. And so that was what the terrorist attack was backdraft terrorism, as we would call it, direct blowback from that, atrocity. They're bombing neighborhoods. They don't know who they're killing, shelling neighborhoods. They're killing innocent people, obviously. And then, Reagan did get sick of all of this stuff. And I have the quote, I tweet this from time to time, a quote from Ronald Reagan from 1982, where I guess was previous to that, where he had called Menachem Begin and told him, you got to cut this out, because there was a massive Israeli bombing campaign against a neighborhood in East Beirut, I believe it was. And Reagan said in his diary, he wrote, I told Begin that I deliberately used the word Holocaust. And I told him this has to stop. The symbol of this war is going to be a 7-month-old girl with her arms blown off. And that was Reagan said that. And then it's a different anecdote it's the same anecdote, but from a different source. And I need to go back and find this one. But I know that this had happened where then the bombing stopped in 15 minutes. And Reagan said, whoa, I didn't realize I could do that. And that was it, which is another huge lesson for our current situation, that Joe Biden could pick up the phone right now and end this war. He absolutely could. But he doesn't have anything like the integrity of Ronald Reagan, unfortunately.
The Peter Schiff Show.
It really just bothers me, the hypocrisy of these squad members who denounce capitalism, now denouncing the companies for closing stores that aren't making a profit when they don't even like profits. They're talking about, oh, this is going to cause jobs. People are losing jobs. Well, they think the employers are exploiting the workers anyway. Why aren't they celebrating the fact that these greedy capitalists are getting out of their cities? Why doesn't the government, why doesn't Boston, the city of Boston, just open up some supermarkets and some drugstores where people can shop and let the taxpayers absorb all these losses? If Boston really wanted Walmart to keep these stores open, why didn't they offer to cover all the shoplifting losses? I mean, after all, Walmart is paying taxes, supposedly, right? They're in Boston paying taxes. And one of the things that those taxes are supposed to cover is the police, right? But they're not even getting that. The police won't arrest the shoplifters. So what is Walmart, or Walgreens, rather, I keep confusing them. What is Walgreens getting for its money? It's paying taxes for the police, and the police aren't on the job because they're afraid to arrest the criminals because that would be racist. And so the result is the stores are shutting down. And a lot more stores are going to shut down. I mean, you can't force this company to stay in business. The company is only in business to make a profit. It's not there for public service. These squad members act as if the companies are there to serve the community, like the community owns them somehow. No, they don't. They're there to make a profit. They're there to serve the interest of the owners. Now, the way the owners make a profit is by helping their customers who live in the community. That's not their goal. Their goal is not to help the community. Their goal is to make money. But they can only make money by helping the community. That is the beauty of capitalism. That is the Adam Smith invisible hand. But the socialists that we have sent to Washington don't understand economics. They've never read Wealth of Nations. They don't have any idea why nations get wealthy or why they're impoverished. I mean, they're the ones that are impoverishing them. And you can see it right here. The government is destroying these businesses. And who is being hurt, right? Well, the community that was being helped by profit-seeking capitalists who opened up stores to make money. But now they can't make money because of widespread theft, right? That the government is not prosecuting or stopping. So they're leaving, right? They're only there to make a profit. They can't do it anymore. They are gone. And the community is not like, well, they're entitled to this. They're entitled to a store. No, nobody is entitled to anything. You only are entitled to what you earn, to what you work for. People take all this stuff for granted, that just because you're here, you're entitled to stuff. No, you're entitled to freedom. That's a birthright, right? But you're not entitled to free stuff. The things that you have because you earn them, and because other people who are trying to earn money are doing that by providing goods and services for you to buy, not for you to steal. Walgreens is not there so that you can steal. That's not why it exists. In fact, a lot of the people are basically saying, hey, they should stay there. Walgreens should keep these stores open because we need to steal our stuff. How dare they take away all the stuff that we're stealing? That's not fair. These racists won't let us keep stealing their stuff. Right? That's what people think. Of course, now what's going to happen is the thieves that were robbing these local stores are now going to have to drive further away to do their stealing because it's probably the whole state that is not enforcing these laws. So all that's going to happen is people are going to have to go further away to do their shoplifting. Of course, the honest, law-abiding people are going to have to go further away to do their shopping. But as the criminals end up expanding and doing their shoplifting at other stores, now more stores are going to close down. And eventually, it's going to be harder and harder for people to do business. Now, what's going to happen? Well, that's going to benefit Amazon, right? Amazon had good earnings today, hit a record high. Amazon loves this, right? Because the more stores that shut down because of high crime, right? Well, the more business there is for Amazon because it gets to ship stuff. Or UPS. Now, of course, eventually they might start robbing the UPS trucks or the FedEx trucks. I mean, maybe that'll be the next thing, right? Where the looters will just start, like robbing these trucks. I mean, how hard could it be? I don't think the drivers are armed. Just pull up next to one of these trucks and just take all the stuff. That's probably what's going to happen once enough of these stores shut down. So then Amazon will have to stop delivering into certain neighborhoods. And then, of course, the squad will say, oh, Amazon is racist. They don't want to deliver into these neighborhoods. No, they don't want to deliver there because they don't want to lose money. It's got nothing to do with racism. These companies would love to keep these stores open in these African-American communities. They want to make money in African-American communities. That's why they opened up the stores, right? They were African-American communities when these racists opened up these stores there. So the race of the customers didn't bother Walgreens, right? If they're racist now, why weren't they racist then? If they're so racist, why did they open the stores in the first place? They opened the stores because they want to make money, even if there were some racists at Walmart. Their greed, right, which these socialists don't like, the greed is more important than their racism. See, that's the beauty of capitalism. Even if you're racist, it's not going to matter because you want to make money. And so you have to treat your customers nice to make money. Even if you don't like them, you still have to be nice to them, right? And so capitalism eradicates racism, not government, creates it. But they want to make a profit. That's it. They went in there to make a profit and they're leaving because they're not making a profit. And this is just a perfect example of it and the hypocrisy. And they still don't learn their lessons, right? You'd think AOC or this Ayanna Pressley, would you think they'd think, hey, wait a minute, maybe capitalism ain't so bad if we're talking about, what we lose, or, maybe we shouldn't have all these crimes. Maybe we shouldn't be coddling criminals. Maybe we need police. Maybe we shouldn't defund the police. Maybe we need more police officers. Maybe we shouldn't vilify the police officers because when we had police officers, we had all these stores. And now that we told the police officers not to arrest the criminals, oh, the stores are now shutting down, right? Kind of make that connection. But, I think what's ultimately going to happen too is maybe the cities will start opening up their own stores, and it's going to cost the communities a fortune. And taxes are going to have to go way up because the losses are going to be huge, and then more people are going to leave, and these cities are going to be in even worse shape than they are today.
Your daily dose of liberty education starts here. The Tom Woods Show.
Can you describe what exactly is it that we're facing in terms of the state of human knowledge in various disciplines?
Okay, a bunch of ways to answer that question. Let me use an analogy that people might be familiar with. Have you heard of this term, Gelman amnesia? You familiar with that?
No, but I'm sure I'd like to know about it.
Okay, so it's this idea that you can imagine some expert in, let's say, foreign policy, reading, let's say, the Washington Post. And he's reading through and he reads an article that is talking about something that's happening in the Middle East. And this individual happens to have a lot of specialized knowledge about the details of what's happening in the Middle East, but he reads the Washington Post article and he goes, this is garbage. Like, this is completely wrong. The conclusion is backwards. The names are wrong. The dates are wrong. It's like this absolutely terrible piece of journalism. And he goes, wow, isn't that shocking? And then he turns the page and he reads about something that's happening in Japan. And he assumes that everything he reads about Japan is just true. He just seems to forget. He's got amnesia that the quality of writing about the thing he had knowledge about was really low. And he just assumes it's high quality when you're talking about Japan. So this is called Gelman amnesia. It's kind of a famous concept. My claim is that the exact same thing is happening throughout academia and has been for a long time. That people who gain specialized knowledge will, like you were just describing earlier, will realize, oh man, maybe people are wrong about this essential concept. Maybe people are wrong about their interpretations of what happened in the Great Depression. And maybe the scholarship around the Great Depression was really, really shoddy. And then they think this is an anomaly, this is some siloed scandal. And they don't see, because they haven't put the time in, that this is the norm across disciplines. So what we're seeing right now, I think because of the internet, is more and more people realizing, okay, there's shoddy knowledge in epidemiology, and there's shoddy knowledge even in biology, and in economics, and in physics, and dare I say, I won't go into it, in higher mathematics. That's the line everybody cringes at, but it's there too. That there were institutional reasons for this and social and psychological reasons for this. So I'm saying that, in the big picture, academia has failed, and I'm trying to play the story out of when it failed and why it failed. And the narrative I am coming to is that the 20th century generally was filled to the brim with really bad ideas that were articulated poorly, that paradigms were established not due to their intellectual merit, but because of political and social reasons. And it just is the case that once a paradigm is established, it's incredibly hard to clean it up over time. And so when you look at the modern paradigms that we live under across domains, most of them were established in a time period, I say, between 1880 and about 1950. This was a time period where you had a bunch of revolutions, not just in the world. You had political revolutions, economic revolutions. You had, electrification, for example. It was also a bunch of revolutions that were happening in the world of ideas, stretching from math to physics to economics and psychology to medicine. A bunch of our modern paradigms were established in this time frame. And, in my opinion, those paradigms aren't very good. Most of them have very big flaws that were even pointed out back then. It just turns out that for historical and political reasons, the skepticism, the good skeptical arguments that were made criticizing the ideas, let's say, in the Copenhagen interpretation in physics in the 1920s, those skeptical arguments didn't win out. Again, not due to their intellectual quality, but just due to social dynamics. So sort of in the big picture, the way I put it is, I think we're in the middle of a dark age. In my opinion, I am an optimist. I think we're coming out of the dark age. I think a lot of people are realizing this. And so what I'm trying to do is kind of take stock and say, okay, what are the ideas, big and small, which we need to carefully re-examine? What are these treasured ideas that we believe there's a consensus of experts about? What are the ones that are good? What are the ones that are bad? And unfortunately, the more I research, the longer the list gets. Right now, I have a list that has more than 100 entries in it. I think each one of these topics really does need to be re-examined in detail at some point by somebody or some institution. So kind of coming full circle to what I'm doing with this new research institute, it's called the Natural Philosophy Institute. And the reason that I'm in the process of making it right now is because I realized I only have so much time, and I only have so much interest that will drive me deep enough down rabbit holes where, like, I'm really interested in the philosophy of mathematics. That's one of those things I'm willing to go very deep down the rabbit hole. But it's impossible for me to go down all the rabbit holes that need to be gone down to kind of see the big picture and get us out of the circumstance that we're in. So I figured what I need to do is try to make a research institute to help bring other people in, to try to coordinate other researchers, either because I can pay them. I'm not there yet. Before that, maybe I can bring other independent minds that are out there on the internet, and we can coordinate on which rabbit holes to go down. And we can have a very careful, skeptical eye in looking over a bunch of topics, and then having, if you will, something like a heterodox Wikipedia, let's say, which is saying, okay, here are we're not just going to make a one-off Facebook post about, hey, look, this idea is wrong. That'll be lost forever. We're going to say in a methodological way, here is a bunch of, here's a long list of really important topics that we've gone through and we've vetted. And here is the evidence, in favor and against what the orthodoxy has been for the last century or so. So that's what I'm trying to do with that FI. And that's the big picture for you, Tom.
I mean, I remember all the way back at the time of the Persian Gulf War of 1991. And one of the things that people did to indicate they were on board for that was they would tie a yellow ribbon on something. So the yellow ribbon was like the emoji of today.
Mm-hmm,
but that wasn't that. I mean, so I feel like the perceived need to show these outward signs that, don't worry, I'm not on the team of the crazy people, I'm on the popular kids team, I think has multiplied.
I think that's a very valid observation. Let me put one potential hypothesis out there. Is it could be that what we're seeing is social dynamics at play near the end of an empire. Okay, so it's tempting to universalize and say, hey, maybe the internet has revealed some flaws in the human psyche, or maybe the internet has pushed us into a new cultural window. But it's also the case that we might be, our American culture might be breaking down in a unique way, where if this were happening without the internet, you might see a lot more yellow ribbons out there anyway.
Yeah.
But because we're seeing general decay, that's just, we're missing cause and effect here.
Kick it off here with this letter from George Washington in 1793. I'm going to cite it again a little bit later. He says, the Constitution vests the power of declaring war with Congress. Now, keep in mind, some of these same people want you to believe that the power to declare war is limited to Congress just issuing a document. They have no say over anything else. But there is not a single person, anti-federalist or federalist, that they can cite at the founding that believed that to be the case. Instead, everyone, even Hamilton, believed that the power to declare war was the power to change the state of things from peace to war. Even if another nation declared war first, it was still up to Congress. Because if you think about it, not in any situation, you may not always want to go to war. And they wanted to have a scenario where it wasn't in the hands of a single dude to make this decision, because maybe you want to have a war with the people on your southern border, for example. This is something that we'll address here in a little bit in 1793. But George Washington actually said, well, maybe we don't want to do that because it might draw a European ally and create a wider war. So it really was up to the representatives of the people and the representatives of the states, at least how it was at that point, to make this decision, even in response to another nation declaring war. So the Constitution vests that power with Congress, according to President Washington. Now, he did follow up on this, and it sounds like he included a big caveat. So he said, therefore, no offensive expedition of importance can be undertaken until after Congress shall have deliberated upon the subject and authorized such a measure. So most people, when they hear this, because they have confirmation bias, they just want to believe that George Washington didn't follow the Constitution as, well, the Constitution was approved, and therefore, well, or the Constitution wasn't approved in the way that we're telling you, that only Congress can make this decision. They say, well, oh, see, look, he set the stage. He can do these offensive measures. As long as it's not a big deal, maybe small raids and things like that, we're all okay. But they don't know the context of what this was about, when it was said, or anything of the sort. They don't know that George Washington made this statement even after he was aware that another nation had declared war on the United States. So after the other nation had declared war, he's still saying we can't do any offensive measures of importance, basically very close to a completely strict defensive line in the sand until Congress specifically authorized more. Now, he writes to Governor St. Clair, October 6, 1789. He says, Congress, having by their act of the 29th of September last, empowered me to call forth the militia. So up until September 29, 1789, George Washington did not believe that, even though it was spelled out in the Constitution, he did not believe he was authorized to call forth the militia to respond to Indian incursions, attacks, reprisals, self-defense, however you describe it. Couldn't deal with violence in the frontier until he was authorized by Congress to do so. Congress, having by their act of the 29th of September last, empowered me to call forth the militia of the states respectively for the protection of the frontiers from the incursions of the hostile Indians. I have thought proper to make this communication to you together with the instructions herein contained. And he sent some instructions specifically to a couple of the governors and basically says, I would have it observed forcibly that a war with the Wabash Indians ought to be avoided by all means consistently with the security of the frontier inhabitants. So avoid war as long as you can keep it safe, but do not go out there looking for war. He's saying focus on peace first. He said the security of the troops and the national dignity. So you have to be consistent with the security of the frontier residents, the inhabitants, the security of the troops, and national dignity. That was a big deal for George Washington, this dignity thing. He says, but if after manifesting clearly to the Indians the disposition of the general government for the preservation of peace and the extension of a just protection to the said Indians, they should continue their incursions, the United States will be constrained to punish them with severity. So he's saying, look, offer them a deal, stay at peace, tell them you'll even protect them and keep things at peace. You want to trade, that's of course George Washington's policy, but if after this they keep attacking, they keep doing these incursions, and of course other people can debate over who was doing incursions, who was on the offense, who was attacking, who was defensive. But for him, under the Constitution, he's basically saying, look, only after we go through all these efforts can you actually go out there and punish them with severity. And this is, again, more evidence that what all the supporters of the monster state, supporters of unilateral executive war powers are just full of it. Either they're totally lying and hoping you're ignorant, or they're ignorant, or maybe some kind of combination of all the above. Now, to sum it up, George Washington understood war powers like this. Congress makes the decision if the nation will go to war. And you can fend off of it an attack or repel an actual invasion, but that does not implicate the declare war power clause. And so that's why he kept giving these commands to stick to defensive measures only, just very straightforward. And he repeatedly went to Congress for approval to go on the offense and only went on the offense when they did give him the approval. Now, on top of that, I think it's important to reiterate that Washington and his entire cabinet took the position that Congress still would be the one to decide if there were going to be offensive measures, a declaration of war, even after another nation had declared war and had been attacking over and over and over. This is George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, Henry Knox, and Alexander Hamilton. All were unanimous in taking that position.
There's another variable, and the Fed claims they have no control of this, but I say they instigate it, and that is dealing with the budget and the deficits. So often when I was in Washington and the Federal Reserve Board chairman would be before the committee, I would ask him about this, and they usually deferred, about the deficit. They usually deferred to the Congress. They spend the money, and we have to do what they say. But the other way to look at that is the Congress does it because they're partners with the Federal Reserve because they know the Fed is going to print the money. But they go back and forth, and they leave out the people who suffer the consequence because long term, the people will have to pay for it. But there has been budget discussion, and I sat through those things for many years, and really it didn't take long for me to come to the conclusion it's all talk. It doesn't give a budget that they live by. It has nothing to do with a business person that has to deal with a budget. And they talk about this. They can change it. They can increase it. They can always have emergencies. But what are the numbers this year? I guess they didn't cut very much or not even pretending to cut anything, because if they're pretending to cut, I probably wouldn't believe them anyway.
It was more of the same, quite frankly, and we're getting a lot of rhetoric from the administration, and I would argue some gaslighting as well, but the numbers really don't support it. I mean, the introductory message for the budget suggested, and this was a direct quote, Biden said, "Throughout we have delivered on our commitment to fiscal responsibility, cutting the deficit by more than 1.7 trillion in the first 2 years of the administration." But fiscal responsibility sounds impressive, but I'm not sure it's the reality of the situation. I think a quick look at the numbers really dispels the notion. Over the next 10 years, from 24 up until 33, the total deficit is projected at 17.16 trillion. There will not be a single year in which the deficit will be less than $1.5 trillion. And that's all assuming that there are no intervening wars, recessions, or other spending sprees in that time period. But to think about that for a moment, right? Responsibility is now defined as spending at least $1.5 trillion more than the government extracts in revenue every single year for the foreseeable future. Federal spending is now projected to grow from 6.9 trillion in 2024 to over 10 trillion in 2033. So the one thing that's clear, there isn't a plan in mind, and spending is the name of the game moving forward, and I think that just ends very poorly without a sharp change in direction.
We all talk about, and the people are becoming aware of it, and even the average pundit on TV knows that there's a big debt. It's $33 trillion, and there is a house that's never going to get paid. But then they go and do the same thing again, because it isn't one party. You could say, well, it's only the Democrats that spend the money, but the record shows that it is a bipartisan thing. So when people cry out, what we need is more bipartisan, I said, well, so far we have too much bipartisanship, because they're the ones who finally passed the budget, and they endorse all this activity. They endorse this foreign adventurism. So I think that bipartisanship is a big deal. But the one thing they don't talk about a whole lot, I think is very significant, because this will be the bottom line, because it depends on other factors, and that's the unfunded liabilities. And there are some predicting now that Social Security is going to be in real trouble in less than 10 years and maybe sooner. And I don't think they can predict exactly when, because if there's a big dip in employment, the cash flow is different, and there's so many variables. But what about this unfunded liability? Does a number come to you about what people, because I see different numbers referring to how much we really owe. If you were a business and just because it wasn't funded and you owed the money, it would be a significant number. But that number has to be huge as well.
It is. We hear varying numbers, of course. I think over $100 trillion. The reality is, I don't see how we pay our unfunded liabilities in the situation we are, particularly in a climate of mounting debt and mounting debt service. You mentioned Social Security. Debt payments last year were essentially the same as Social Security outlays. So the reality is there isn't a plan. There isn't really even a plan to pay for the budget shortfall, right? Biden's talking about taxing, right? He's saying wealthy corporations and individuals aren't paying enough taxes. So the solution is to tax them more. But even by, the administration's own numbers on increasing taxes, it would bring in about $120 billion in extra revenue. Furthermore, the 10-year deficit projections include these increase in taxes. So, we've got about 6.6% of deficit reduction over the next decade. Where is the other 93% of the money coming from? Presumably, that money will be borrowed. So, there isn't a way to meet our unfunded liabilities. The direction we're heading now is to amass more debt, and any student of history understands how that ends for empires. It always ends in the same way.